This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. Today's guest is probably the most international guest I've ever had. Welcome guitarist Timothy Reid to the show. Timothy comes to us from Japan via North Yorkshire, England. How did he end up in Japan? It's a really interesting story about obsessions, but that's not where we begin. We begin with Timothy getting into Northern Soul and the punk band that cemented his musical course. After going to school for music, he made the decision to move to Japan, but he prepped for years before leaving. That turned out to be a very good idea. Timothy talks about the realities of living abroad, including the inability to practice using an amp. That led to his entry into a guitar contest just so he could play through a Marshall stack. Turns out the judges loved his improvisational approach, and he won. That led to a job as a demonstrator for...
Okay, yeah, I'll keep it really simple. So, okay, here we go. Hey, this is Timothy Reid let me go again. Hey, this is Timothy Reid on the Performance Anxiety Podcast. Thanks for listening and check me out. Hold on. Okay, one more time. Sorry, this is going to be it. Hey, this is Timothy Reid on the Performance Anxiety Podcast, and thanks for listening. Okay, great. Okay, cool. No problem.
Official on Instagram, or go to timothyreid.com for more information. Follow us at Performance ANX. Our stuff is at performanceanx.threadless.com. Or just slip us some dollars at ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety. And we present Timothy Reid on Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network. All right, 3, 2, 1. I'll figure that out. I used to have to do it all the time for another podcast I used to do, so.
Yeah, that's like a true audio engineer test. If you can do the clap thing, you know, like sometimes I ask guys like, oh, should we do like a clap? And they're like, why? And I'm like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. No, I used to have to do an edit for a podcast I did with 3 other hosts, and they were out in LA. And I'm outside of DC, so I would have to do all the editing. So I'm like, all right, guys, let's figure out a clap, and then I'll figure out I can edit from there, nice and easy.
That's great. The only problem is when you do the 3, 2, 1, and someone goes on 1, and the other guy goes on 0.
Yep, that happened a lot, and I think the guys would do it just to screw with me sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because I know my
2
buddies. So
yeah, because gone are the days of the old, you know, like the clipboards you see in those old movies.
Yeah, I could get one, but it wouldn't help anybody else.
Yeah, I know what you mean, right? I mean, it's just the sound really that you want. You don't need the little writing on it or anything, right?
Yeah, I just need to see it click on the waveform, and I can sync everything up nice and easy.
Oh, but I love that stuff, man. You know, honestly, like I don't mind talking about anything, and that's kind of, I mean, it ties into what I'm doing now anyway, because now I changed my career from being like a kind of recording, I don't want to say session musician, because I'm not even sure if session musicians exist in the same way as they did originally. You know what I mean? That's kind of like, it's like, you know how you have like American punk and British punk, like pop punk, American pop and British punk, and they're both punk, but they're seemingly totally different genres.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of the same like with like session musician now and session musician back, like, you know, the Steve Lukather, Michael Landau, that, you know, session musician thing. It's like, I did that, but I'm not sure what I was doing is what they were doing. Because I always had the idea what they were doing is, you know, they were getting a phone call in the morning, can you come in and record with Michael Jackson? And they would like get, you know, their 4x12 and 6 guitars and a pedal, put it in the back of a big truck, drive over to the studio. Whereas what I was doing was literally just kind of getting an email, sitting in front of my computer, and then sending a WAV file, which is like, it's totally different, even though I guess at the end, it's the same goal, but I was doing that, and then, yeah.
Similar concept, but very different approach.
It's totally different. And then, because I couldn't really pay the bills doing that, like I just couldn't get it to work, I moved into the video game industry. And then, I'm sure we're probably going to talk about this anyway, but yeah, and so that's why I ended up getting more into the kind of like having to do voice recording and having to find out about all those like noise reduction plugins and stuff. Because if you'd have talked to me about that 5-6 years ago, I would have had no idea. I'm just a guitarist, man. I just play these chords. but I had to get into that stuff. And so it's actually really interesting for me. And so like talking to you, a guy who does podcasts and has to worry about all of that stuff, that's kind of intriguing for me as well. And I can learn a lot. So I'm not just to preface that by saying I'm happy to talk about any of that stuff.
Awesome. Well, we'll get into hopefully all of it. But what I want to do first is find out how you started in music. So you are a professional musician in a lot of different areas, but I like to find out how people get into that. I mean, like, so you're currently living in Japan. Obviously, you don't have a Japanese accent for those listening. So you're not from Japan. You're from North Yorkshire in England, right? Okay, so was music a big factor in the family growing up? I mean, was it a big presence in the family? Do you have any other musicians in the family at all, or?
So, no, I'm an only child, so no brothers and sisters. I just live with my mom back in North Yorkshire in the UK, as you were saying, which is a very rainy, dark area of the UK. It's kind of up north. It's below Scotland, but it's up the north. Okay. We have one day of summer a year. Our one day to leave the house, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty dark and dreary, but it's got a lot of character. And I think that that's part of the reason that I ended up being quite creative. I think that a lot of creative people come from those areas where, you know, there possibly isn't that much to do. So you have to kind of make your own games and find your own things to do. My mom loved Motown and soul music. That was all she did. She listened to it like some rock, but it was mainly like Motown and soul music that she listened to.
Okay.
That was a thing in the UK. I think it was called like Northern Soul, and it was before my time, but it was like, I think what happened was like we got all these Motown and soul records. It's like we got a lot of the kind of B-side versions and stuff that weren't popular.
Okay.
And they got sent over to the UK, and they became really popular in like dance halls. And so all these kind of like American Motown and soul singers, and even possibly the ones who maybe weren't that popular in the States, became really popular in the UK, especially in the north of England.
Okay. That's bringing back a kind of a memory. And it may sound a little strange, but I follow, and I'm social media friends with Brian Cannon from Microdot, who did all the Oasis covers and all. And in the, I want to say, early to mid 2000s, like somewhere between 06 and 2010, 2015, somewhere around there, he was shooting a lot of these Northern Soul dance hall events, like you were saying, and he would post them, and I thought they were really cool. And I'm like, and one of my favorite albums, Verve's Northern Soul. So it kind of makes a lot of sense. I didn't understand it really so much back then, but now what you're telling me makes it all kind of come together a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting thing. I think there's a lot of documentaries and stuff about it, like just because it's such a kind of bizarre place to go. Like you'd go to the north of England where there's just kind of like, I don't know, pubs and sheep. You know what I mean? And then go into a dance hall and hear like some weird, like, I don't know, the Four Tops or the Temptations or like B-side. And it's kind of like, it was really interesting. But I'm really, at the time, I didn't understand exactly what I was listening to. It was just kind of there. And it wasn't until I actually ended up going to university and studying music at university where they kind of, the teachers would play like Motown music and be like, and for me it was like they played it and it didn't need any explaining because I already heard all those songs. And There was a bass player who like played a 5-string bass, and everyone was like, why would you play a 5-string bass? But like obviously in like a lot of R&B music, 5-strings kind of the standard, you know what I mean? And so it was like that was already a vocabulary that was like ingrained in me. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, no, 5-string bass, that's cool. You can play all those R&B stuff on it. But that's getting a little bit ahead.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
But how I got into music was I wasn't really into high school, to be honest with you. And I think in probably my first year at high school, there just happened to be like a punk band playing at lunchtime. And they were going against all the school rules, you know, like they had like their ties around their heads and like, because we have to wear school uniform in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they had like their ties around their heads and they were like jumping around. And I was just like, I was not into high school. And so I was like, wow, that's what I got to do. I got to start playing guitar in a punk band and then I don't have to worry about wearing my school uniform properly and everything. And so I went home and basically, you see, that's not too strange. You know, I think a lot of people have that experience. I think a lot of people have probably got that history. The thing that is strange to me, though, is I'm not sure why it was guitar, because there was 4 guys on stage, a singer, bassist, drummer, and a guitar. Mm-hmm. And I went home and said to my mom, I want to get a guitar, an electric guitar. But I don't know why I chose electric guitar. Like, why didn't I? Because there was honestly no thought process. It wasn't like I looked at the guitarist and then looked at the bass and thought, oh, well, that looks easy. You know, it was nothing. Yeah. It was, I just watched the band. I loved it. I went home and I said, I want an electric guitar.
It was just in you.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I honestly don't know what it was, because looking back, I kind of wish I'd have been a drummer, because, you know, like there's no drummers around, so it's so much easier to get work. But
yeah, drummers and a good bass player, they're always in demand.
Or a good piano player. I mean, anything but electric guitar, man.
Was that the first instrument you learned how to play, or was there anything before that, even like school bands or anything like that?
Well, it's funny because I always thought it was the first thing I learned to play. I always thought I did learn the electric guitar first. But actually, looking back, 2 things stand out. So one was that whenever I was in music class, I would always just love like playing notes on the piano. And it wasn't even like playing songs. It was the idea of like, I would play like an E, an octave, an E and an E, the same note. I mean, I would change the bass note to a C. So now it would be like an E with a C in the bass. And I remember like telling my friends, being like, guys, come listen to this. That sounds so cool. And I remember them just blank, because, you know, like kids like 9, 10 years old, I remember them being totally just bewildered and like they couldn't understand, like totally not understanding, like, what are you talking about? It's cool. I'm like,
who cares?
Yeah, and I just remember then like I'd moved the C to a D, so now it was an E over a D, and I'm like, oh, it sounds so good. It wants to go back. Like it's pulling us back to that note. And
yeah.
And then, so there was that. I obviously had that inclination to like, I was interested in harmony, even though I didn't know what harmony was. Right. And then going back further than that, I had a 2-deck tape recorder, which was, you know, the cassette recorder where you have 2 cassettes and you can play 2 cassettes, or you can hold down record and play on one and record from the other cassette over to this cassette.
Yep.
You could also do a weird thing. You could hold down the pause button like halfway, and what it would do is it would like play double time, like Chipmunky, like sped up. Yeah. And I would make mixtapes for the car for my mom. So I would get all her like soul and Motown tapes and stuff, and I would like put all the songs she liked onto a single tape. And then I would MC in between the songs and like introduce the artist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I must have been about 6 or something, 7 when I was doing that. I didn't realize that that was kind of a big part of the musical thing until I started DJing 5 years ago.
Oh.
That's another long story. But basically, I was on tour with a keyboard player, a Japanese keyboard player, and his son is a DJ, and he was also the roadie. And he's a little bit younger than me, but he's about the same age as me, and the rest of the band were a little bit older than me. So during the downtime in rehearsals and sound checks, I would kind of just find myself hanging out with him, you know, and talking to him a lot.
Yeah.
And it turned out he was a DJ, and he was like, "Oh, you should come and hang out." And And I honestly never knew what a DJ did, really. People would say to me, DJs, man, they're not musicians. And I was like, I just thought, no, I think there's something there. Like, I think they're doing something musical. And I think it's more than just pushing buttons. But I never really knew what it was. And so I met him and I went with him to see what he was doing. And he kind of showed me the way around the DJ thing. And it was just really interesting for me because it was so alien. And so I started DJing, mainly like electronic dance music. But also, you know, I did a bit of everything. And I still do it. And and it's funny because it reminded me of using that cassette player when I was a kid. Because I was essentially doing the same thing. I was choosing the songs that my mom liked. And I was making like a compilation and then MCing in the middle, which is another thing. Like, you know, so I was essentially DJing when I was like 6, even though I didn't know it.
That is awesome. DJ Moth.
I know, right? That should be my DJ name. That's the coolest nickname for Timothy is Moth. It's such a punk and like dark name, and I wish I had the ingenuity to have figured that out as a kid. Like, oh, that should be my nickname, and push that on people because no one called me that.
Hey, you know, you can always start a new project.
I know, right? Yeah, that I can change my name. I have a few friends who changed their stage name like well into their careers, and I've had friends who have released lots of really good songs and then decided I'm going to change my name. And that's like I have huge respect for people who do that because I've thought about that because there is another person who shares my name and we are fighting for Google space on a weekly basis. Yeah, exactly. And so, and we couldn't be much different, to be honest with you as well.
I know. You also share a name with a 70s actor.
Really?
Actor. Yeah, Tim Reid. He was in a sitcom in the late 70s, early 80s called WKRP in Cincinnati.
I know. I've never watched it, but I've heard the name of that. Yeah.
He played the guy Venus Flytrap, a DJ, a disc jockey. Yeah.
You kidding?
No.
Wow. So maybe Venus Flytrap should be my DJ name.
There you go. Then you get the Steve Vai connection in there too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's insane. Yeah. That's insane.
So DJing and then a little bit of keyboard but finally you guitar was what you were drawn to innately because that's what you asked for without even thinking about it. Was that the moment that you knew you wanted to be a musician, or was that more of I just don't want to be in class and this is a good way to get out of some high school? Exactly.
You nailed it. That's exactly what it was. It was purely, if I do this, I don't have to do science class. Or I can, if we have a rehearsal, I can say, I've got to go to a rehearsal so I can leave class early or something. That was purely what it was. And I was, like I said,
that completely.
Yeah. And I was into like pop punk and punk music. And so not the hardest music in the world, you know, just kind of 4 chords and, you know, it's more about just having fun and, you know, and so I was doing that but I very quickly made a band. That was one of the things I realized. It probably wasn't so much the guitar that I was interested in. And this is something that's even true today. I was interested in making music and being in a band. Those two things were the two things that interested me. The guitar was kind of irrelevant. It was almost just a tool to do those things. Yeah, and this is the same way I feel now. And this is why I epically failed at being a product demonstrator.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a job that I did for a good 5 or 6 years.
That doesn't sound like a failure.
Well, no, so I like speaking. I like talking to people, and I like trying to explain things in a way that everyone can understand. Okay. And I like music, and I'm a super nerd when it comes to like musical stuff. Like I'm one of these people who I don't have hobbies. One of my friends said this once. He said, "You don't have hobbies, you have obsessions."
My wife will attest to that about me as well.
Yeah. And so when I get into stuff, I get really into it to the point where I want to know, like, if I get into an artist, I'm like, oh, I want to see all the sound check videos and their interview, where they're talking about, like, I don't know, Burger King, and I'm like, oh yeah, he used to go to Burger King and order this, like pointless information, but
I know exactly what you're talking about. I have said it several times on this podcast, but one artist that I'm that way about is Jimmy Page. And if Jimmy Page burped on a session, I wanted to hear it.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous. But I still feel that way about him. And anything he puts out or anything, I've got I've got about, I want to say I'm creeping in on 4,000 CDs. And I've got probably 40 to 45 that are, well, actually probably more than that are Jimmy Page related. So it's, the Led Zeppelin albums, all the stuff he put out, but I've got bootlegs of him playing little guitar bits. So one bootleg is just the 4 tracks they did with the Bombay Symphony Orchestra, 2 versions of Friends and 4 Sticks. And then the rest of the CD is like 25 songs, and they vary in length from like 30 seconds to a couple of minutes of just him noodling on acoustic guitars. And I'm like, wow, I want that.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, we have to talk then. Might have to cut this out of the podcast, but we have to talk later because Japan is the center for rarities.
Yes, I know.
In regards to CDs and records.
I have bought, I don't know how well, I get an email occasionally from them, Fish Heads. Okay. I have bought a bunch of stuff from Fish Heads over the years, but that's really my only point of entry for the Japanese market there. But so yeah, I'm willing to talk with you about all that.
Because I have a lot of friends. I have another friend, Australian guy, who's shout out to I can't say his real name, and I've forgotten his stage name.
Australian guy.
Australian YouTube guy, you know who you are. You're a legend. He's a huge Led Zeppelin fan too, and he comes over here to look for records. He specifically wants the ones with an obi. It's like a strip that runs down the side of Japanese CDs that has this.
Yes.
Yeah, it has all the liner notes basically in Japanese so Japanese people can understand it. And he's mad about them because they're kind of rare, they're cool, but they raise the price by a lot. And so he comes over and looks for them. And so whenever I'm in near a record store for a sound check or, when I'm going somewhere, I'll go in and I'll just through Led Zeppelin, Rush, Dokken, all those bands that he likes, and I'll find something, give him a call up, dude, I just found this, and he'll be like, I got it. All right, no problem. But sometimes he's like, get it, I need that. And so, yeah, and I've seen a lot of Jimmy Page stuff over here, a lot of kind of bootleg stuff and stuff that might not be official, like someone's made it and stuff like that. And so for sure, next time out and about, if I see a kind of a bizarre Jimmy Page thing, I'll take a picture and send it over to you.
Absolutely. That'd be amazing. So when did you said you studied music in after high school? When did it become the obsession? When did it become what you wanted to do? Because, you said you started off as a way to get out of class, but then you ended up studying it after high school. Yeah.
So it was the kind of, so after I joined the band, we started writing songs really quickly, and we probably wrote within about, it doesn't sound quickly now considering how many songs I write now. I write a ridiculous amount of songs now, but when I was in high school, I'd say within about 2 months, 3 months, we probably had about 3 or 4 songs.
Okay.
Yeah, which isn't bad for a 12, 13-year-old kid. And
right.
Admittedly, the first song we ever wrote, it was the same chords for the verse, the chorus, the whole way through. But actually, you listen to some artists on the radio nowadays, and it's the same chords all the way through the song anyway. So
you're not wrong.
No, and so we started performing at high school, and we won one of those Battle of the Band contests. We won quite a few of those contests.
Cool.
Yeah, we won a load of those. But I think it was purely just because we were into it. It wasn't that we were really like the best band. It was just, we were putting thought into not only like the music, but like, what should we wear and where should we stand? And, or how about the bass player goes on that side of the stage and I'll go on that side of the stage for the song. And so we'd be doing this kind of weird, because we were like kids, so we only had, our cables were all super short. So we'd be like at the extent of our cable, and I'd be looking at the bass player like, don't walk backwards, man. Oh, my guitar's gonna get unplugged. Be watching him while playing. And so we did that. And then we used to play around the UK. So we used my high school band. We used to play, in the local city, but we used to go out of the city as well and play.
Okay.
And we recorded an album and everything like you do, and we're just, And we were lucky that our drummer's dad at the time was kind of a hippie dude, and he was just all. I mean, he wasn't like music related, but he was just, whenever it came to music, he was like all in. Like he was like, so he was like, you can rehearse at our house, in the front room. And
nice.
And people would complain, and he would be like, no, don't worry about it. I'll sort it out. And he would,
That's awesome.
And he would like drive us to sound check, and he would pay the money that was missing for the recording, and he would get the albums pressed for us and stuff. And
wow,
he kind of was like really important in keeping that band going. And I never really realized that until a lot later on. And then when it got to the end of high school, I kind of realized that was kind of the only thing other than skateboarding that I was into. And I also remember, it's a weird memory, I remember my band, we ended up being like a kind of, I want to say a power metal band at the end. We started out as a punk band.
Wow.
And then we got really into like Metallica and Pantera. And then I got really into like Iron Maiden. And then I got really into the European power metal bands, because there was a store near me a CD shop, and the guy in the CD shop had like super long hair, and the shop just had one of those incense burners, so it smelled really strong in there. No windows, black walls, black ceiling, black floor.
Yeah.
And I would just go in there, and I would just literally look through CDs and choose CDs that had the coolest cover, and I would just buy them.
I've done that too. Oh, yeah.
It was a great experience, and I feel really sorry for younger generations now who don't have the opportunity to do that, because going in and just choosing an album purely on the jacket, on what the jacket looked like and the name of the band maybe, and then being like, okay. And then I had a portable CD player, so I would literally, as soon as I buy the CD, put it in the portable CD player, and I'd listen to the entire album on the walk home.
Yeah. That's exactly how I got into some, and it's funny you mentioned, European power metal. Like that's how I got into Halloween. So I saw the Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1, and I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I went back and got the other stuff, and then the cover art it played a huge factor in how I chose a lot of the stuff that I listened to.
Yep, totally.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And that whole kind of European power metal stuff, I'm not 100% sure, and a lot of people could correct me on this, but I'm guessing it's kind of school of Iron Maiden. You know what I mean? It's like all those bands, I think, when I look at the Iron Maiden art, where it's kind of, there's a slight horror element to it, but it's more of like a fantasy thing, right? It's a fantasy, like a Tolkien kind of thing. Not so much Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden's a little bit more like kind of cartoonish, I guess. But a lot of those power metal bands, I think they went, okay, so let's take from that and let's do more of like a fantasy thing. And a lot of the Finnish bands, I was into a lot of the bands from Finland, and a lot of those bands, it's funny because you would look at the album art and it would be like some elves under a waterfall, and then you would open the jacket and all the members would look like elves. Under a waterfall. That was what they looked like. They could be members of the band. They're just beautiful people with long, straight blonde hair, and
the cover art is a self-portrait.
No, 100, totally, yeah. And then you watch Lord of the Rings, and it's like, okay, all the elves look like people from, the Scandinavian countries. It's kind of interesting. But
so true.
Yeah, but I got into that kind of music. And so by the end of the band, we were playing pretty intense music where like there was a lot of, it was a big band. We had like 6 or 7 members because we were a power metal band. So we had drums with the double kick, we had bass, and we had 2 guitarists who were doing all the twin guitar leads and solos. We had a singer and we had a keyboard player. Yeah.
Wow.
So it started out as like a 4-piece and it ended up as like, yeah. And it was like long songs, like 6-7 minute long songs with 2 guitar solos and harmony solos. And then, because the other thing as well I noticed is my mom, even though she listened to Motown and R&B, she also had Gary Moore's greatest hits.
Oh, wow.
And I never realized that like Gary Moore was essentially my kind of first guitar hero.
That's awesome. Oh my God. He's so amazing and very underappreciated.
Super underappreciated. Yeah. I mean, and because people might listen to his blues stuff and they're like, oh, he's a great blues guitar player.
Yeah.
But the stuff I was into was the rock stuff.
Yeah.
You know, in the fields and you know, and those kind of songs, you know, it was just like where you had the whammy bar on his guitar and he was playing like a spiky guitar. It wasn't a Les Paul.
Right.
And doing all the dive bombs. And it was like, oh, that's cool. And I never really realized that he kind of had that power metal thing going on. And I think G-Force was one of those bands that he was in that was like that. And yeah.
Forgot about that.
Yeah. And so I kind of realized as well that I started getting into the guitar thing. I had a guitar teacher who gave me a video of G3, which was Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, and Eric Johnson.
Yeah.
3 phenomenal guitar players. And I remember being very confused as to when anyone was going to start singing. You know, watching that video. I'm 3 songs in and no one's actually sung anything yet. And I'm thinking, this is weird. No one's singing. There's a lot of guitar solos.
Yeah.
I just watched that video over and over again. And originally it was Joe Satriani that just I thought was so cool. And then after a few months, I realized, oh, Vai's so cool, man. Like Vai's the man. And I ended up getting a spikier guitar and doing all the whammy bar stuff and
with the monkey grip.
All that. No, I never had a monkey grip, but yeah. And then towards when I really got into uni, doing music at university, it was all about Eric Johnson. I went back and I was like, oh, and Eric Johnson to this day is like, he's up there with Gary Moore. Probably in my top 5 guitar players, Eric Johnson and Gary Moore are fighting for second place, I think. Yeah.
Eric Johnson, just his tone is immaculate all the time. It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know how he had it. I'm not a musician. I'm a very bad self-taught guitarist and all, and I'm just in awe of his stuff. I was big into the flashy guy. My first loves as far as guitar, Jimmy Page was the first one, but then I got into Satch and Vai about the same time. I think Satch first and then Vai, and I had the G3, that album as well, and I'm just like, Eric John, I'm like, this is good. It's very clean. Even his distortion is clean. I'm like, this is very weird. And it took me a little longer to get into Eric Johnson stuff, but once I did, man, it blew my mind what he could do.
It's insane, and I know exactly what you mean. It's clean. And the other thing that was a little bit difficult for me at first was Vai and Satch were seemingly doing this kind of alien thing. You know, it was music from another world. There was, really? The reference points were few and far between. You know, you can bend a string, but then Vai would bend it and tap something, and you'd get this crazy harmonic high-pitched ring, and Satch would bend a note, but he'd bend it with a wah pedal, and it was like,
and it would be sustain that would just go forever.
Yeah. Whereas Johnson, like, he'd play like a blues. You know what I mean? Like, he'd play an actual blues and say, okay, that's a blues, and he'd play a Hendrix lick that was like it was very bluesy. And I remember listening to that originally and thinking, no, this isn't my generation. I want to be doing this hyper modern thing. And It wasn't until, like you said, it wasn't until later on when I went back and I, like you said, I heard the tone and I was like, okay, hold on, this is deeper than just pedals and effects and amplification. Like,
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot in there. And so, yeah, Johnson very quickly. The other thing as well is just that he didn't look as interesting. And I know that that's quite aesthetic. It's not that important, but he didn't look at, like, Vi, you know, he had the guitar with the monkey grip, and he was a tall, skinny dude, and he looked kind of interesting. And Satriani too, with the sunglasses and, you know, and
That
the
chrome
sneakers.
guitar.
And the chrome guitar, yeah, the Chrome Boy. Yeah, what a cool guitar, man. And Johnson was playing a Stratocaster, and it's like, my first guitar was a Strat. So it was like, okay, well, I'm going backwards because my first guitar was a Strat, so why would I want to listen to someone who's playing a Strat? But then you don't. That's part of the journey for everyone. Is you don't realize straight away. It takes time. Great things and amazing things take time to kind of sink in and realize how good they are. And that was an acquired taste. It was certainly an acquired taste.
Yeah, I 100% agree. So you're going through college and you're studying music. When did you start thinking about moving to Japan as a viable option for your career?
So I went to university, and in uni, all I knew is I was going to study music, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do because, like I said, the whole session guitar player thing, I was told that was a thing. However, I had never met a session guitar player, and so I wasn't sure exactly if that was a thing anymore. And being in a band is tough, and so I just went to university with the idea that, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this degree and just ride the wave, basically.
Okay.
And so in my first year of uni, I just happened to sit next to an overseas Japanese student who just asked me one day if I've ever heard any Japanese music before. And I had not heard any Japanese music before. And he gave me a load of CDs that he had copied from his computer. You know, blank. You remember the blank CDs that like had like just pen on them? Someone had written on them like the name of the artist and
Sharpie somewhere.
Yeah, as a Sharpie, and you would put it in your computer, and it would say like untitled track 1, untitled track 2, and you never knew what the songs were. Yeah. And so I had
There's
about
no Shazam to check it out either.
No, you just exactly. And so I had like loads of CDs. He must have given me like 15 or 20 CDs, and I just burned them all at my computer. And I had all these albums that were like untitled track 1, track 2, and I listened to them, and it's just really refreshing. I just really, really enjoyed these bands purely because it was a sound that I had just not heard. Okay. And I went back to uni. I gave him the CDs back, and I said, really like that song, and I like this song, because I didn't know what the names of the bands were. And
right.
Yeah, and some of them were in Japanese, like the actual Japanese writing. So it was like, so I had no idea. But that was intriguing for me also. Just the fact that there was this band, and I couldn't read the name of the band. I had no idea what they were singing about. The music itself was, again, it was kind of Beatles based, a lot of it. Like a lot of it was like based in harmony. It was based in like chord progressions was the main focal point of the music, as opposed to like, you know, rhythm in electronic dance music, let's say, or let's say, you know, even like reggae and soul music, often the harmony, you know, in like funk music, you know, think about James Brown, it's one chord for 2,000 years.
Right.
You know, like, so it's not about harmony, it's more about like groove and dynamics. But a lot of the music was based in harmony. It reminded me of the Beatles. It reminded me of a lot of British music. I was like, okay, it's not complex, but the chord leads to the next chord, and that chord leads to the next chord, and the melody is seemingly connected to this chord progression. And so it was something that I kind of I had like I could understand it, but at the same time I couldn't understand it at all.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I said to him, like, yeah, I really enjoy it. And he was like, would you be interested in playing these songs with another guy who's a Japanese drummer? We just want to play these songs, but there's no one who knows these music. So I was like, sure. So I started playing those songs with him, and he was a really, really good bass player. So he was working with a lot of other artists, and so he would say to those artists, "Oh, I have a friend who plays guitar. Can he come and play guitar?" And so I would get in with all these artists who I probably wasn't quite qualified to play with yet. However, he'd pull me in there because he had a lot of pull because he was a great bass player. And he looked interesting because in the north of England, there were not many, I mean, there might be now, but 20 years ago, there weren't many like Asian people around other than we had a Chinese community, but they kind of kept to themselves, you know. You go to a Chinese restaurant and order Chinese food, but that was it. You wouldn't speak to them about, you know, it was a big disconnect. And so he would get in the band because he looked cool and he played well, and he would get me in with a lot of those bands too. And so I started playing with those guys, and I would ask them stupid questions in rehearsal. How do I say this in Japanese? How do I count in the band in Japanese? How do I say, you know, I don't know, syncopation in Japanese? All these music terms.
Right, yeah.
And they teach me them. And then at the end of uni, they went back to Japan. But I mean, before that, I had decided, so after meeting that dude and playing with them, I decided, well, maybe this is my thing. Maybe my thing is everyone wants to be a professional musician. I don't really know what that means. And so like maybe my thing is that I go to Japan and I become a professional musician in Japan. And so, that was why I went to Japan, and I started learning Japanese, and I started kind of eating all my meals with chopsticks.
So you became obsessed.
Yeah. No, I really did become obsessed, and I learned Japanese and stuff. And
wow.
And when I arrived in Japan, I had 3 years for my degree, so 3 years I'd studied Japanese, and I arrived in Japan, and I had reasonably good Japanese skills, and and I kind of already had acclimatized to Japan quite a lot in the UK, like you said, because of that weird obsession thing, and so that was what brought me to Japan. And then I originally was doing like English teaching for the first 3 years, and then I won a guitar contest over here, which is a very deep story in and of itself.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question I have is I've heard of, you know, people going to Japan, China, you know, a lot of Asian countries to teach English. Do they separate it, or do they care if it's British English or American English? Because sometimes, you know, there's a disconnect there between the two, the same language, but two different countries, you know, it's evolved separately. So do they make note of that at all? Does it matter?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, what I can tell you is that seemingly the world is getting smaller. I heard someone say that's global warming.
I love that.
So, but seemingly, yeah, the world is getting smaller. And so these days, they probably do care. They probably care if the textbook uses British spelling or American spelling, stuff like that. Yeah. When I came 16 years ago, there wasn't as many foreigners. And I know for a fact that 15 years before that, there was even less foreigners. So when I came, you had like Spanish people, you had Korean people who spoke English teaching English, you had Indian people teaching English, you had Americans, British people, everyone. Anyway, you know, they wanted English education to keep up with a lot of the business stuff. So it was like, it doesn't really matter who's teaching it as long as, you know, they're prompt and come to work on time, and they can teach basically. And so back then it wasn't much of an issue. I imagine now, because there's more of an influx of foreigners into Japan. I mean, I think right now it's like the highest tourism has ever been, purely because the yen is so low. So right now, there's a lot of people over here, tourists over here. So right now, yeah, they have more choice. They can get 5 people coming in for a job and be like, well, let's go with the American guy because he's native. Back when I was a teacher, if I went in there, you know, they were besides themselves, because they would be like, oh, you're a native speaker, will you please come, you know, because they would have 5 Japanese people who lived in the States for a year teaching English, which is great, you know what I mean, but they always wanted native speakers. And so I hope that answers your question, but yeah.
So was your family supportive of you coming over to Japan?
That's a good question. Not really. There was never any problem. But the benefit of having like a super small family, like no brothers or sisters, and only living with my mom, was that, to be honest with you, like I always just did what I wanted to do anyway. Yeah, like there was never really any question of like having to be somewhere or having to do something. It was, if I want to do something, then I just kind of did it, and it either worked and I reaped the rewards, or I suffered the consequences. And my mom was supportive of both of those things. She was supportive when I did something that worked, and she was supportive when it was like, well, you kind of messed up, but that's, you learn from that. And I think she drove me to school possibly twice in the whole time I was at school. I walked to school in the rain, snow. Yep. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why can't you just take me to school? It's raining. But to be honest with you, no, I get it, because that went into all aspects of life as well. And when I decided I wanted to be a musician, okay, well, try. You know what I mean? There was never any question of failure, but there's also never any question of success. It was just, okay, yeah, do it. And when I decided I wanted to move to Japan, there was never any question of that either. Yeah, there was. Yeah, it's awesome. I meet some people over here who have wealthy families and stuff, and their outlook is always very different to me, because for me it was kind of like there was always a certain amount of worry as a kid, and even now I still have that. When I first came here, I had to get a working visa, and you have to extend your visa it could be every year, it could be every 3 years. It depends on how good the immigration is to you, and if they look through your documents and they decide, well, we'll give you 3 years or we'll give you a year. And so every year, I unfortunately would always get a year visa, which is no reflection on me, I don't think. It's just sometimes you get only a year, you might get more. I would always get a year extension, and I would have to go back in 3 months before my visa expired and show them all my tax documents, and then they would, if it was all in order, they would extend it for another year. And I remember 6 months before my visa would expire, every day I would be in my head, okay, don't forget about my visa, because if you overstay your visa, they'll kick you out, and they won't let you back in. Whereas I know people who would say to me, oh, I got to get my visa extended, and I'll be like, oh yeah, when does it expire? And they'll be like, next week. And I'll be like, I know, and I'll be like, dude, like, have you got all the forms? And they'd be like, nah, I'll go get them. I've got some free time next week. And I'd be like, what if you get sick? Or like, what if the guy says, oh, sorry, that guy's not in, we can't extend. I'd have everything set like 6 months before, and I'd be ready. I'd be saying to my boss, like, I need Tuesday off because I'm going. And yeah, because that's my personality, man. Like I worry about that kind of stuff, and so that, my family had never had a problem in me coming to Japan, but it was just more, the issue was more, I worried about that kind of stuff, and that worked out for me in the end, because my doctor always tells me, I have a lot of doctors, man. I'm at the doctors every month. That worrying thing, man. My doctor tells me, you're probably not, touch wood, you're probably not going to get sick, because people who worry, man, who are always in here, they catch that stuff early. It's the people who just kind of, you know what I mean? They just ignore stuff and, I'll be all right. It'll be fine, It's just a lump, Yeah, and they don't go, and then they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, why didn't you come 3 years ago? And they were like, I thought it would, I thought it was nothing. Which, funnily enough, there's a benefit to that. Obviously, it's not a benefit, but the benefit to that is that you go through life pretty smoothly. You know what I mean? Not really worried, and especially if you're surrounded by people who help. Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're surrounded by people who can do their jobs, because they'll make sure that they do their jobs, so you don't have to worry too much. I know people who've been in Japan for 50, 40 years, 30 years, who speak no Japanese, but because they don't worry about it, they get by, man. They go to the bank, and if the guy doesn't understand, they speak louder. Yeah. And, the person behind the bank they'll do their job, and eventually it'll get sorted out, because this guy behind the counter will stress out and get it sorted. And it's like they get through fine, And then there's me who's like, I was hitting the textbooks 3 years before learning all these words. I'm like, I need to know them. But it's different ways to be, man. But I think that society is healthy when you have a balance of those types of people. You need both of those types of people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All right. So you go to Japan and you're working, teaching English. And like you mentioned, you entered this guitar contest. And my understanding is that you were just kind of like, that's not my thing. What happened? How did that whole thing transpire?
Yeah, so I was living in a really small apartment where I couldn't practice with an amplifier because the walls are paper thin over here.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're not made of paper, but they are paper thin. I think traditionally they might have been made of paper, a friend of mine, another guitarist, told me about this guitar contest, and he told me that you should enter it because he thought I could do pretty well in it, and I wasn't interested in the contest element of it because I've just never been into like competition. Like I wasn't a sports guy, I was a music guy in high school, so right. Competition was something I was just never really into, and so I was not really interested in the contest. But he was like, oh, you can play through an actual guitar amp, like a Marshall guitar amp, you know what I mean? Nice. And so I was like, okay, I was like, fair enough. Yeah, I'll sign up just because I don't really have much. I didn't have much of a chance to play through an amp. Yeah, so I signed up for that reason, and then turned up, and I played the contest, and then I got through to the next round, and that was an example of me being completely ignorant because I wasn't interested, but it was like, oh, you've got through, fair enough. Then I went to the next round. You got through that as well. Okay, fair enough. And then it's like the final. And I'm not sure when it actually hit me that I was like kind of in the final, but yeah, I did the final, and then I won the contest. And then one of the judges at the contest was a guy from Korg, the company Korg, who make the keyboards. Yeah. And he just really dug my playing to the point where he was like, he came up to me after the contest and he was like, oh, I voted for you. I thought you should win. And if you ever want to do guitar demonstrations, let me know. And you can come to the music stores when we do our little, go in to look at the guitars. You can do a little performance and you can talk about the guitars. And so that was how I managed to change from English teaching to music, because actually I meet a lot of foreigners in Japan who, it's really funny because their hobby is music and their main thing that they do is Japan related. Whereas my main thing I do is music and my hobby is the Japan stuff. Yeah. And so when I meet them, I'm always asking them all these questions about Japanese grammar and verbs and adjectives and all that and they're like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Is that a Fender American Professional? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to talk about that. That's boring. Tell me about verbs. And so that was how I changed from the English to the music thing. And a lot of foreigners who want to do music and happen to live in Japan, they always ask me, how do you change from music? How do you get into the music career? And so it's just to answer that question, because I know a lot of people want to know that. For me, it was that guitar contest. But it wasn't just that guitar contest. It was that guitar contest coupled with the fact that I had been studying Japanese really hard, so that when the guy came up to me to say, congratulations, he might have said it in English. I responded to him in Japanese saying like, oh, no, no problem. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. And he was like, oh, you speak Japanese really well. And so I think he might have not offered me that job if I had just said, oh, my pleasure. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think the sparks fired into his head then when he was like, okay, wait a minute. He saw the dollar signs. He was like, this guy speaks Japanese. It's like, oh, maybe this guy could teach for us. Like, and that's,
it's
and
useful.
So, exactly. And then there was the final catalyst there was that he said to me, if you record an album, let me know, send it over, and you can come and play the album. And I had recorded my album for my university project.
Okay.
I had recorded an album in the style of Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, Eric Johnson. And that was an album I've forgotten the name of it now.
Electric Zen?
Electric Zen. That was Electric Zen. That was my first. Yeah. That was my first album, and that album, if you listen to it, it's essentially there's like the Joe Satriani track on there. There's the Steve Vai track on there. There's a kind of Jason Becker, Marty Friedman track on there. There's a Eric Johnson-y kind of track.
I'm gonna even throw out there like the title track. To me, sounds a little like George Lynch.
Yeah, George Lynch, what a guitar player.
Yeah.
What a guitar player. Like, talking about underrated guitar players.
Yeah.
What an underrated guitar player. And in regards to everything, not only his tone, not only his licks, but like the scale, the note choice. Yeah. And then even then, just how cool he looked. Yeah. Like, the coolest looking guy in the world with these cool guitars and the tan and the hair and like...
He looked way cooler than Don Dokken.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, like, I would put him up there like with like Nuno, you know, just super... Could have been an actor or could have, you know, like...
Oh,
wow,
for sure.
and yeah, and ripped, the tan... So yeah, George Lynch, definitely, and all those guys, like the guitarist, and like I said, it was an obsession. So I got into all those guitarists, but I happened to have that album on me, and I literally just reached into my bag and I said, well, here's the album, and I think he said, well, are you free like next Friday? I was like, what? Yeah. He's like, okay, so come to this music store next Friday, and I'll bring some guitars and choose one. And play with that, and then you can take that home with you, and then just bring that to the demonstrations.
Wow!
So, and I honestly speaking, I wasn't doing great in regards to financially. You know, I wouldn't say I was struggling, but you know, I'd moved to Japan, and I was doing the English teaching thing, but you know, there's a lot of costs that come with setting up in a new country, and you don't understand where to get like the cheapest stuff straight away. So you end up spending more money than you have to. And I wasn't struggling, but I wasn't like, I was, you know, pretty much like, what is it called? Hand to mouth. Is that right? You know, where it's like, you know, you get the money and
yes, you were like paycheck to paycheck.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so, yeah, I was, so to come into the store, and because Korg was a member of Paul Reed Smith at that time. Paul Reed Smith was owned by Korg, the Japanese thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so to come into the music store and have 4 Paul Reed Smith guitars, which, as you know, are not cheap guitars. I mean, when I was a kid, they were the guitars that they would hang on the highest guitar stand so that no one could touch them. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And if you had started looking at them for too long, they'd give you the side eye in the store, like, don't touch that guitar, man. You know, like that's.
You got to check your credit before you can look.
Exactly, they're the expensive guitars, man. So to go into a store and have all these Paul Reed Smith guitars lined up, and have someone was like, okay, choose 3 of them and just take them home with you.
Oh my god! So
I was on a train home to my tiny apartment with 3 hard cases with these guitars that each one of them cost 3 times my rent. Oh. You know what I mean? Yeah, and that's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of trust that guy put in me as well, because you know what I mean? Like I could have just taken those guitars and left the country. Like, I mean, I owe that guy a lot. And so I started doing those demonstrations in music stores and the whole kind of like the Namsho, kind of Japanese Namsho style stuff, and playing my songs. Yeah, and then other companies like pedal companies and stuff would get in touch with me. Can you do the same thing for our amplifier company, for our pedal company? And so I changed from English teaching. I managed to kind of cut my English hours down to where I was doing, I'd say a little bit of both, probably. I was earning half my money from the music thing and half my money for the English thing, which is it was a kind of sketchy place to be in, because when you get a working visa, all the visas in Japan have different visa types, and they correlate to the type of work that you're doing. and they tax you and stuff in regards to that. And so if they find out you're doing a different job than what your visa says you should be doing, it's kind of like a bit of a slap on the wrist, and like, okay, we're going to have to look back through your taxes and figure out if you owe more money than you actually do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had to make the choice at that point as to either go full music or keep doing the English thing. And like I said, because I'm not a teacher like language dude, I'm a musician, I never hated the language thing. A lot of guys, they come over, they do the English teacher thing, but they really want to do something else that's their main thing, but they're native speaker, so they use that as a stepping board, you know. I always liked the English thing. I like talking to people. So for me, the English teacher thing was never, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it was kind of hard to leave that job because I didn't hate it at all. It was fun. And so I made the choice to change, and I changed to music full time. And yep, I started doing music full time. And then it wasn't until COVID, basically, when the demonstrator job kind of, for me anyway, kind of ended because we couldn't gather people together in the music stores anymore.
Yeah.
You know, originally it was like gather as many people as you can. And so we'd end up with 30 people stood around an amplifier, and I would just play my songs, and then I would talk about it, and they would ask questions. And then all of a sudden the stores were like, oh no, 6 people max can come in the store, and then you have to wait outside. Yeah, it was pretty serious over here. And so it was like there was a limit to how many people could be in the store, and people didn't want to be gathered around other people. You know, people were worried about it. So it was like, okay, well, it's just not, you know, to do a demonstration to 4 people in a music store is just not, it doesn't make sense. So yeah, and so slowly those jobs kind of just faded away, and I stopped doing it, and I tried doing the session thing for a while, but like I said earlier, it's a totally different job now, I think, to what it was back. Yeah.
Like we were saying, you know, it's no longer just going into a studio and plugging in and reading some charts and playing along. It's home-based stuff. It's really wild. While you're making that transition to doing your music, is that when, are you making your next album, that Hybrid Sonic? Was that all done in Japan, or was that kind of done partly in the UK? Because that was what, in 4 years after Electric Zen? Was that right? So that one, I mean, I'm assuming that one was completely done in Japan then.
Yeah, that's right. That one was done in Japan. So alongside, obviously, I tried to keep playing because that's my thing, isn't it? You know, like I was a band guy, and the reason why I got the demonstration job, I think, was because the guy. So I didn't go into it in great detail, but basically what I did at that guitar contest was a pretty technical thing. You know, because I was into, like I said, I was into Vi and Satriani, and I was into the whole technique thing in tapping and sweep picking and legato and all those technical stuff, you know. Yeah. I got into that, and I practiced a lot, and so I was a technical guitar player. And so my thing in that contest was that I wanted to do something kind of far out, and I'm a huge Holdsworth fan. Alan Holdsworth is kind of like my number one. That's why I said Eric Johnson and Gary Moore are fighting for number 2, because unfortunately number 1 is always going to be taken by Alan Holdsworth. Wow. And I was a huge Holdsworth fan, and Holdsworth used to do this thing live where he would improvise a song, mainly with the drummer. So the drummer and him would kind of the drummer would start playing, he'd let the drummer play, and then he'd kind of start like following the drummer, and they'd kind of have like a musical conversation. And it might not be in any way harmonic. It might be more like a technical thing. It's like the drummer's playing some rhythm, and Alan might kind of match that rhythm, but there's not really any thought about like the notes. It's just pure improvisation. And I used to really love that. And at that guitar contest, there was kind of this weird thing about like, do you want to play the live version of the album version of the song that you are playing? And it was all like Hendrix or Jeff Beck or those kind of songs. And I was like, I wasn't interested in that. So I told the band, okay, during my set, the bass player, you can just stop playing, and me and the drummer, and I was like, to the drummer, I was like, what's like the coolest fill you know? And they were like, oh, I don't know. I was like, well, play that. I mean, just, you know what I mean? Just play that and then just see where that takes you. I mean, I'll just try and play on top of you, and then I'll cue you guys in, and let's just go back to the song, bring it back, and then we'll end. Wow. And I was lucky that I had some really good players playing at that contest, the backing band. And so the guy who wanted me to win, he was a bebop trumpet player, which makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So he obviously sat through, 50 renditions of Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix that day, bored out of his mind. And then this weird foreigner gets on stage and kind of, he tells the bass player to go away and just starts playing madness. And I guess the audience probably didn't get it, but he probably sat up and was like, "Oh, it's it's kicking off now. It's happening now. Here we go."
He woke up.
He woke up at that point, which was a kind of dangerous thing to do on my part. But to be honest, like I said, I wasn't interested in winning, so it was like, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to do just play through the amp and
play through the march.
Yeah. And so I was really into that. And so when I was doing the demonstration thing, a lot of my demonstrations were based on technical stuff, and my songs are quite technical. Yeah. And so I wanted to keep playing while I was doing that in bands, because I think that it's really important for at least for me, for my soul, to keep being out there. I kind of think of it like on the battlefield, like you got some general, telling his troops what to do, and it's kind of like if you're not out there, you don't really know what you're telling people to do or what the climate is. So I the whole time I was playing in my band and playing my songs as well. And I was playing my original songs, and it was just kind of the next step was, okay, well, I need to write some more original songs. And the other thing as well about my solo music is my solo music is very much, it has I don't want to say like a meaning, like a personal meaning. It's more of a vehicle for what I'm doing right now, my music. It's an unadulterated vehicle for what I'm doing now. So at that point in my career, I was getting really into jazz fusion music, purely because the guy at the Korg was pushing me in that direction as well. He was a bebop player, so he would meet up and we'd play through standards together at his office, and he would smoke like a demon. And so I would come out of there being like, I've got lung cancer. I know I've got lung cancer because I've just passively smoked so much. He would smoke so much, but I would bear with it because we would go in there and we'd just play standards, just do a little 15-watt clean amp, and I would just roll my tone down and play standards with him. And so that album, there's quite a lot. There's a lot of improvisation on there. All the songs on that album for improvisation, they're all like solo head forms where you've got like a melody that everyone knows, you play that, and then the solo, you can just play anything you want. There's a form, but you just play over it. To the melody, and all the songs on that album are that style, and I think the album after that as well. And so the next two albums, the next one is Absolute Magnitude, I think was the one after that. That's also that same thing, and they were written so that basically I can play demonstrations with them, because all of those songs I can change the solo section and play it however I'm feeling on the day. I could play a Stratocaster and still make it work with a Strat, because the songs they're malleable, they can be changed.
Okay. I really enjoyed those albums, like on Hybrid Sucks, Mason Grove. I love that. That to me at points it sounds kind of like East meets West.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of that influence on there as well, just from being here. Yeah.
Magnitude has some amazing stuff, like Indigenous, the volume swells that come through on that. I love that. The sitar on Drones, that is killer.
Yeah.
And Highland Party, that is so cool. The traditional.
It's a jig, yeah, because I'm half Scottish and my mom's family was Irish, so I'm essentially Celtic, and so I always wanted to write a song like that, like a kind of jig, Yeah,
I love it. And is this around the same time you started working with the video gaming industry?
No, that came quite a lot later. So I did those albums, and then I wanted to go back to my like kind of rock thing, because I love improvisation, but it's tiring. Oh. It's really tiring. You know what I mean? Those gigs, they take a lot out of you, and honestly speaking, they don't really give a lot back in regards to financially and stuff, which is not an issue, you know what I mean? It's not about money at the end of the day, but it got to the stage where like I would go to Tokyo and I would be tired and I would check into the hotel, I would go to a show and I would play a show, and then at the end of the night the bass player would be like, I need paying, and I would have to go to the cash machine to get money out to pay the bass player, and I'm already tired because I'm in Tokyo, I'd been traveling, and now I have to pay out of my pocket to play a show that was already hard work, and there might have only been 10 people there. That was tiring, and that was really tough, and it was like, okay, maybe I want to do the band thing again, because it's totally different, and I'm a band guy. I started out as a band guy, and so I got more into rock and started playing more with I wanted to make like an actual band and stuff, and so I started playing with a few guys and stuff. And then the next solo album after that would be like Peace of Mind. Very much, like improvisation is the opposite to peace of mind in my opinion, in regards to, having peace of mind in my opinion, because you got to think about so much, you know what I mean? You really, really have to be in the moment and now, and concentrating on what's happening now, because that's all that matters in improvisation. The drummer starts playing a groove, you have to follow that groove, and then the bass player plays this note. Okay, so I'll play this note. And it's super honest. It's really honest, and it's true. The solos on the album, I think I wrote the solos on the album as opposed to improvising them. They're written out. And I would play them similarly. I might not play them the same, but then the album after that got more where it's like that kind of thing as well. And so my music's always evolving to match whatever I'm studying right now. And then I was playing with other bands and doing the session thing, but then when COVID hit, stuff stopped happening and I had to find other income sources. And I'd always been writing, I've always been a writer. And like I said, music for me was a tool. A guitar was a tool for me to make music, basically. So I was never a guitar player, really, in that sense. Like, I just got put into that category because of what's happened in the contest, and because I had reasonably good technique. Okay, you're a shred guitar virtuoso dude, and I really never was in my head. Like, I'm more about writing music. Yeah.
It's funny you mention that because, talking about the album Peace of Mind, to me, it sounds like you kind of reached a different level of playing and writing on that album. It's not the I mean, the technical work is still great, but that's, like you said, that's not the focus. The focus is the song. Like Eastern Wind is my favorite off that album. I mean, it's got some amazing runs on there that really scratch that shred itch, but the song is so well written and beautiful that it's more than just an exercise in technique.
No, that's exactly it. And I think I probably alienated quite a lot of listeners when I kind of decided to do that. But I think it's important to be really true to yourself. And like I say, you know, the technique thing was never the point. And even guitar was never the point. Like I really struggled with the demonstration job because people would say to me, "Oh, is that like a maple? Is that a spruce top on a maple body?" And I'd be just, I have no idea. I have no idea. And they'd be like, "Oh, are those pickups like waxed? Are they dipped in wax before?" You know? And I'd be like, "I don't know, but this one sounds good.
Yeah.
This one I can't use, and this one sounds more aggressive." It's like, I don't know about the capacitor, the transistor, the type of wood and all that. I have no idea about that. And if someone tells me about it, it goes in and it comes straight out the other side. I have no idea. But my thing is just like I've played guitars, like really cheap Chinese made versions of guitars, and I've been like, sounds awesome, that's a great guitar. And then the company are like, can you not say that because we want to sell the expensive guitars? And I'm like, yeah, but it sounds so good. Like it's a really good guitar. I buy this guitar, it's great. So that was like, to say I did that job for so long, that was why I had a lot of issues there, because it just the honesty and stuff as well. And so yeah, I needed to change jobs. And I saw that a video game company was looking for a transcriptionist. They were looking for someone to write out the music that had been written. They needed someone who had a good ear, who could like listen to, for example, a guitar recording and be like, oh yeah, it's G, D, A minor. You know what I mean? Just
right. And
then write that out on manuscript. And they couldn't find anyone who could do it. Actually, I lied. They found two people who could do it, but one of them was part-time. And so I took that job doing that, and then quickly I think they realized I could play guitar as well. So it's like, oh, you can play guitar, maybe you could record some songs. And then, oh, you write music as well, maybe you could write. And so I slowly started doing other video game industry stuff. And then and then the company that I worked for, that company for about 4 years, and then that company went under. The Osaka, I'm in Osaka, Japan. The Osaka office closed down, so it was the choice of move like Tokyo office, or it was like stay here. And I love Osaka. I'm committed to Osaka.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love Osaka's. It's a big city, but it's a little bit smaller than Tokyo, and it's a lot less. It's weird. It's international, but it's not as like Tokyo's the capital city, so you get a lot of people running around with seemingly goals they want to, I've got to do that. You hear a lot of languages. In Osaka, it's super Japan. People will speak to you in Japanese. Menus are Japanese. They don't have English translations sometimes. However, it's still a big city, and they have everything here. So I love being in Osaka. So I decided I was going to stay in Osaka and try and do freelance video game stuff. And the other reason for wanting to do that as well is because I wanted to branch out. I found it was certain things were really interesting, like for example, Foley recording, going out with a boom mic and recording the sounds of birds or trains or cars or doors, Yeah, I'd watch people do that, like get set up with a big microphone and a raincoat, and I'd be like, where are you going? Like, I'm going to record this door in a temple because, it's a really unique door and we need that sound. And I was like, that would be fun. I quite enjoy doing that. You know what I mean? Like getting out of the house and
It actually
doing that.
does sound awesome.
Yeah, and then the other one was implementation, which is like actually putting the sounds in a video game. So an animator gives you a 3D model of a guy, I don't know, sitting on a chair, and then they say, so what does that sound like? And you have to be like, okay, so you've got the sound of the chair kind of being compressed, but maybe it's a metal chair, so there's no compression, but you hear the legs slightly ting against the floor, and then also he's wearing a jacket, so you're going to hear like his jacket ruffling. So you kind of have to set up a chair in a room that's really quiet, and like maybe you set up a microphone on the floor, and you sit down 5 times, and then you go back into the sound booth and listen. And one of the times you scraped too hard. The other time it made no sound at all. Maybe the third time it made a little tiny click, and you're like, okay, that's good. And then you compress that, process that. Yeah, and then you sync it up to the video. And if no one, here's the funny thing, if no one says anything, it's a good sound. If someone says, oh, that sounds amazing, it's like, okay, maybe I did too much. You know what I mean? It's really weird. Yeah, like the best sounds are the ones when people watch your video and they say, oh, it's a great video, that guy's a great actor. And they didn't notice any of the sound. It's like, that's a good job.
It's natural. Yeah. That is so wild. It's amazing. 'Cause I haven't really gamed in quite a while. Ever since my kids started to get older, they started gaming. I haven't had the time, but I watch them play games, and I see what, the way the advancement in some of this stuff, and it's just unbelievable. Like you're saying, some of the ambient noises you hear in the game. Somebody's got to record those, and somebody's got to put them in the game. It's something I never thought about.
Yeah, it's exactly, and it really is dependent on the sound designer as well, as to the amount of thought and the amount of quality that goes into those sounds, and a lot of it is overlooked, I think, as well. And I mean, it's the same as the music industry. When you hear a guitarist or when you hear a band, you're not only hearing a band, you're hearing musicians playing together, but you're also hearing a microphone on a speaker or on a drum, and then you're hearing someone's processing of that microphone sound, how they've cut out frequencies or added a little bit of distortion or reverb or echo, or they may have even changed the pitch. I mean, they could have done numerous things to that. And then you're hearing them balance those in together to where they think, okay, this is more important, this needs to be louder, this is less important, it should be quieter, panning them to left and right. And then there's another guy or girl on top of that who has mastered that. They've brought the whole thing together and decided, well, actually, I think that this needs to be more boomy. You know what I mean? It needs more low end. It's a dance track or something. Yeah. So you're hearing all these different elements, and like I said before, you don't want everyone to be super, super, super overthinking everything so that it's real. It's nice sometimes to have, like, let's say a bass player who isn't a great bass player, and they just, they go through the track, there's some errors in there, but they get through it. And then you have a mixing engineer who's super tuned, and he's like, right, I'm going to take all 3 of those takes, and I'm going to use the verse from the first one. I'm going to use the chorus from the second one. I'm going to add a MIDI bass under that just to fatten it up. And it's like you're hearing this collective approach at the end product. And so that's the same with video games. And when you listen to a video game, you might think, oh yeah, the music's great in that video game. But there's also someone, like I said, who's done the footstep in that game when you walk. And
right.
Yeah, and it's funny because that footstep, as small as it is, and how you might not notice it, that might actually be the thing that really just puts that game over the edge. Like, it's, there's this moment in the game where it's silent and all you hear is footsteps, and all the footsteps, the reverb changes depending on the room that you're in. And when that person walks away from me, there's a filter and you only hear the low end of the footsteps. That's something that some games don't have that. It's just they put the footstep in and there it is. And it's a footstep and it happens every time you walk. But where we are at now with video games, it's essentially, it doesn't end the possibilities you can do because we've got unlimited memory now. So
Yeah, that makes me think of a question. So you're in the music industry, you're in the video game industry. Both have really moved away to the detriment, in my opinion, of physical products. Has that changed the sound design of video games at all? That now that they're all just streaming or downloadable instead of a cassette or a cartridge or a disc or something.
So in regards to like the approach to making the music and stuff, not having the physicality of like a disc or a cartridge hasn't changed the approach. That said, there was an initial change from cartridges to disc and then to better quality discs, which was just the memory thing, Mm-hmm. Originally, you were allocated an amount of memory that you had for a video game soundtrack. So if you go back to like the Amiga or like the Famicom, you essentially had like four instruments. And they weren't really instruments. It was like you have 4 synthesizer sounds. Yeah, you have a square wave. You might have a triangle wave, a noise creator. So you're going to use your noise thing to create a snare drum. You might use your triangle wave to create like a bass part, and then you might use your two square waves to create some kind of melody, or you could also create a kind of harmony. You could have your bass play on the root, and then you could have a third and a fifth on the square wave, so you can make a full chord. And so you're very limited. So that was the geniusness of those composers, was working within limitations to create these. Like if you listen to some of the soundtracks from those kind of Japanese role-playing games from those, they would create what are essentially full scores, which could be played by like an orchestra with just 4 sounds. And it's like they would condense it and figure out how they can get, I want to say A minor to the audience, but I only have 3 sounds. It's like, okay, how can we kind of do that? Well, let's leave out the fifth because it's, it's kind of understood. Let's put the minor third and the root in there. And then let's have a melody note playing, stuff like that. And then that changed to, like kind of when we got more better consoles, the memory got better and we had more allocated sounds, to the point where it was like we could just use MP3s or WAV files. Like, okay, now we can actually put real music on video games. And now we're at the stage where we can, it's seemingly unlimited. Like there are, like I work within a engine called Unreal Engine, where they make a lot of video games. And that Unreal has its own music. It has its own node-based musical system in there, where you can essentially, you can do everything within Unreal. I mean, for example, you have like you have a table, and within that table you could insert a WAV file, and then you could insert a mixer, stereo out mixer, and then you could insert a little node in there that says, okay, every time the player enters this zone, play that song, and when they leave the zone, stop playing the song. I mean, you insert another zone node which has a fade in and fade out, and you say whenever the music stops playing, 3-second fade out. Whenever it starts playing, 3-second fade in. And whenever and then you build on that node even more. You say whenever they take damage, I want you to distort that music song a little bit. Just add a little bit of distortion to it so that it gets more grainy. And you build these whole elaborate systems where everything is connected and it's all being processed within the actual software itself. So it's right now we're at a stage where, and this is happening I think with all music, video game music especially, being just a musician is quite hard to actually find work. And I imagine a lot of players are familiar with this. And this was a big thing for me with when I did the session thing, was that when I started playing as a session musician, people would say to me things like, can you send me the DI track along with the processed audio? And so it's like, okay, so I need to record not only my guitar through the amp, they want me to split the signal and send them purely just the audio from the guitar straight into the audio interface. It's like, okay. Yeah, and I would send that to them, and then they would use my guitar, but they might use it without adding any extra time-based effects to it. And I'm like, oh, they used my guitar super dry. And so I'd have to be like, okay, can I send you the guitar, but can I just add some some verb and delay to it to make it sit better in the mix. And then while I was doing that, I might take some, I might EQ out some of the mids because it was clashing. And so it was funny because I went in there thinking that I was going to be playing guitar with a lot of people, and I came out like, okay, I'm like 70% guitarist, 30% producer.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's funny because, like when I stopped working at the big AAA video game company where they had the money to employ me as purely this one little cog in a whole system of musicians. Mm-hmm. When I moved into the indie game world, where you have a team which isn't made of 200 people, now they're made of 14 people. And basically their interview is, can you do everything? Can you record the voice actor? Can you edit? Can you process the voice acting so that it's get rid of all the noise and compress? And then can you put it in game and can you match it up to the actual animations? And it's like, if you say no, I can only play piano, let's say, classical piano, they might have no need for, or they may need 3 songs from a classical pianist. And so them paying you a monthly or a big fee for just, 30 minutes of classical piano, for them, it's not something they can afford to do. They need someone who can come in and pretty much do everything. And you don't need to be able to do everything to a super high ability, but normally they want someone who can kind of get around everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And so jack of all trades kind of thing.
A jack of all trades, exactly. And so that's probably the biggest shift in music now, in video games. And so the whole going to non-physical copies is cheaper, which means that indie studios can release games. And right now, indie studios are doing great because you have things like Steam and the PlayStation Store, where anyone can make a game and publish it and upload it. And so those producers who don't have huge budgets, they're looking for people who can do more stuff. So there's a benefit and a demerit to that. The benefit, obviously, is that you have video game soundtracks which are seemingly more streamlined because the guy who did the music is also doing the sound effects. So you have a connection there.
Yeah.
You have things that are connected. He also maybe did the sound design. So the music works with the sound design really nicely. There's a cohesion there. However, the issue you have there is you might suffer because the guy or the girl who's doing the sound implementation might not really be a composer. So you get a soundtrack and you hear straight away, I think this is just loops from splice.com.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of like, and it's well implemented. Or you might get the opposite. You might get, this is a great soundtrack, but it's not mixed very well. I mean, of course, because the guy's a classically trained orchestrator. He's not a mixing engineer, so
right.
They don't have a budget for a mixing engineer. So there's your demerits and there's your pros and your cons, basically, with how the video game industry is right now. And the one benefit for people who are interested, though, in those kind of jobs is that we live in a world where it's very easy to learn that stuff. You can go on YouTube and you can search mixing. You can search sound implementation. You can search Foley techniques. And there are hundreds of videos of people taking you through the steps and the gear you need. And it's great.
Amazing. It's really amazing. What's on YouTube? It's unbelievable. So you're writing music for video games. Your last 2 albums, Peace of Mind, we talked about a little bit. And I mean, like I said, I think that really is a different level from your first albums. I mean, Breaking Point, Latency. Lot of new sounds and things. Light Behind the Eyes, the title song. You've got the funky blues of Dynamite, Diamond Eyes. First, now that's the first song with lyrics. First,
yeah, that's my Gary Moore thing right there.
That I was going to say, to me, what I was hearing when I first heard it was like a Vivian Campbell era Dio.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, totally. And maybe that's partially the singer too, because he's got that approach to it. I remember when that song brings me back to the heyday of guys like Satch and Vi, late 80s, early 90s, where it was half the album was like flash and technique, but they also had, really well crafted songs in there that were actual songs and not showcases. That's what I remember. When sounds to me like one of those well-crafted songs on the self-titled Joe Satriani album or something. One of those really awesome albums that gets passed over for some of his flashier stuff. You've got like horns, keyboards, vocals. Is that stuff that you're still doing? Are you still working on your own solo music? And does the video game? Well, I guess maybe the question for that is: between the video game and your own music, do they cross over at all? Like, are you working on a video game and you're like, I could make an entire song out of this? Or do you ever think, listen back to something you've recorded for a song, like maybe that's a part of that is something I can add to a video game? 100%. Like those, yeah, no, completely. Like those instrumental songs on my albums are. Yeah, I mean, you could put them on a video game. You could put them on a movie, like. Oh yeah. Totally. And so there's definitely a crossover. And I was inspired by video games as well. I probably should say that. Like, as a kid I was born in 1988, and so I grew up with the PlayStation. Sega Mega Drive was my first console. Super Nintendo.
Mine was the Atari 2600.
Right. Yeah. You see that? I had one, but it didn't work. It was broken. Oh. And I used to try to. That was the one with the like floppy disks, right?
That one had cartridges, but it was like 8-bit. It was really primitive. It was like late 70s, early 80s.
Maybe it was a Commodore or something that I had. Maybe,
yeah. I'm trying to remember which one had. My cousins had one that had discs.
Yeah, mine had like floppy disks.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll be honest, the very first video game I ever played had those enormous floppy disks, and you had to put like 3 in to play the game. And it was all text based. There's no.
See, I'd love to hear some of the music from those. I bet they're on YouTube.
I don't even know if they just had music. I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
They must have, but it was like the prompt comes up and it's like, you're in a dark forest. There's something on the ground to your left. What do you do? And there's only a certain number of or certain words that it will respond to. You'd be like, hey, okay, go just kick it. And they're like, I don't understand that command. It was that kind of early video game, and you had to eject the discs a specific way or you'd ruin them. Oh my God. I remember my uncle just being like, make sure you do this right because I will kill you if you
Yeah. So those video game soundtracks had a big influence on me as well, and there's certainly a tie over between the music and the video game stuff. And then the video game music that I'm doing now is, I personally, I kind of just think of it as an extension of my music. So I'm currently doing music to a really cool project. I can't say much about it because it's still kind of early, man. But it's okay. But I can tell you about the music. So it's a really dark soundtrack, and it's actually really inspired by kind of Twin Peaks, Chris Isaak, James Calvin Wilsey.
There you go.
Strat into a Silverface Fender amp with spring reverb, tremolo. You know, it's that was a sound that I always loved. I always loved that sound, that kind of dark, somewhere between blues and country twang. You know,
and it's like very moody. It's slow. It's like you said, James Calvin Wilsey mastered it. I mean, there was nobody who did it better, and he's actually kind of the guy that got me into that type of music.
Yeah, probably me too. Yeah,
I was lucky enough to see him live once with Chris Isaak in 1990, I think it was. So it was a little theater in Red Bank, New Jersey. I'll never forget it. My uncle took me, my brother, and my cousin, and he's like, "Hey, you guys want to go see Chris Isaak?" I think Wicked Game was just starting to become popular. And it was, oh my gosh, I just thought that was the coolest sound.
Yeah, yeah. Can I ask, when he was playing live, like how was his tone? Like, did it, like, by that I mean, like, was his tone kind of on top of the mix, or was he more buried inside? I mean, I know this is a really specific question, but I'm just really intrigued into how he heard his guitar, not in regards to the tone, but in regards to working within like a band mix, you know what I mean? Because I always felt like his tone, regardless of where you put it in the mix, it's always there. Like, it's just always stands out. And I was wondering if live was the same thing.
It was. I mean, he's got, I'm trying to remember, Roland Sally, I think, on bass. And because I don't think Chris Isaac's band has changed all that much except for James leaving. And so it was right up there. It was, if it wasn't Chris singing, the focal point was definitely James's guitar.
Right. Was it 4-piece, 5-piece?
It was just a 4-piece, I believe. It was 1990. So
yeah. So you had drums, bass, Chris on acoustic guitar and vocals,
and then James on this electric. Yeah, it was an amazing show, and I love the show. I had an amazing time. I appreciated it as much as I could. I wish I could go back and, knowing what would become of him and, his story afterwards, I wish I could just save that moment, because it was an amazing show. And it was in a little theater, Count Basie Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey. I mean, I want to say 500 people, maybe.
Can I ask, was it loud?
Yeah. It was loud. It was loud, but it wasn't to the point where I needed ear protection or anything. Right. Okay. But I often wonder about about guitarists. Like, it's funny because there are some guitarists who have beautiful tones. Like, you listen to them on the record and they have absolutely beautiful sounds, and you go see them live, and some of them, it's quite amazing that they play really loud, and you're like, okay, it's kind of surprising. Like, you go there with this idea, like, oh, this is the most beautiful sound, and like, sometimes, God forbid, you take like your grandmother with you, and then she gets blown away by a wall of amps, and it still sounds beautiful, but you realize that beauty comes from like sometimes volume, or it comes from like a natural compression of like, oh, I'm absolutely pushing the hell out of this amplifier, and that's what makes it sound nice. It's it was great, because I remember I was a teenager at the time, and one of the last, I don't know, it may have been Wicked Game, but it was one of the final songs. Chris was telling people to come up to the stage, like, get out of your seats, come on up to the stage. And me and my brother and my cousin went up. So it wasn't loud enough that we were just blown away off, because we were standing right in front of the stage. So right. Yeah, so, it wasn't there. I went to see Yngwie Malmsteen, and I thought I was going to die. I actually thought I was going to die. I had to like leave the space a few times because like my ears, I could just hear that like insect sound. Oh yeah, yeah. It was great, but it was just like, and I've heard that Eric Johnson plays pretty loud. I've never seen Eric Johnson live, but I've heard he. I mean, you can kind of hear it like on his
before he starts playing on his live DVDs, you can just hear the amp kind of hissing away in the background. It's like, that's probably cranked pretty loud. But James Calvin Wilsey is like, just incredible guitar player. And I'm like, and so this soundtrack is just very based on that and the band. So I don't have a band really for the soundtrack, but I do have whenever I create any kind of music, I try to visualize what the band is that's playing this. I try to keep it and try and figure out, like, even if it's me recording every instrument, I'm just like, okay, who is the bass player in this band? Does he play a 4-string or a 5-string? Is he a good bass player? Is he kind of distracted by chicks in the audience or something? You know what I mean? Like, I try and give each instrument its own little unique thing, and so
that's awesome.
Yeah, for this soundtrack, it's as you said, it's the same as that Chris Isaak setup. So drums, bass, acoustic guitar and vocals on some tracks. Got a really good singer who's amazing, and an electric guitar. And the electric guitar is very much, it's that spring reverb, Fender Silverface, Fender Strat, and just trying to figure out how to balance that within the mix, because, like I say, I have obsessions, so I've looked a lot into James Calvin Wilsey, and there's a great interview of him talking about, I want to say it's what was it called? It's a pedal. It was Pod Farm. That's what it was, Pod Farm, which was one of the early software amplifiers, and he's talking about that, and he's saying how he can split a signal and have one dark reverb, so the reverb with the tone down, and one bright reverb, and he can blend the two together. And I was listening to that, I said, okay, so he's obviously blending the same performance. It's not two separate performances. So he's obviously splitting his signal. I'm a nerd about these things, man. So I'm getting into, and so that soundtrack is probably going to come out as an OST, so an original soundtrack. Like how in films sometimes you get the music from the movie, and then you also get like a CD which might have like 50 tracks on it, and it's the
score for it.
The scores, exactly. So I'm hoping that they're going to release it like that, because essentially, without putting my name on it like that, it really is a solo album.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's what I'm doing now, and it's the sound that I'm playing now, and I'd love to go out and even perform the songs from this video game.
I'm
gonna look into maybe trying to figure that out, how to do that. But then I've got the worry about how do I create that sound live, because in Japan all the live houses have a Roland JC 120, a jazz chorus amplifier, which is a solid state transistor amplifier, which has a really flat sound, super flat. It's almost like a keyboard amplifier, which is nice. It does its job. But for that James Calvin Wilsey sound, you really need like something that's got that twang along with the reverb, and really the Fender amps. You need a Fender Twin or a Fender Silverface or one of them, and they're heavy amps, so I would have to carry that to the show with me, and so all those logistic things I need to think about. But I'd love to play these songs live. They sound great.
Oh man, I can't wait to hear this. Do you play live much anymore? Are you more just working in the studio for the games, and are you working on new solo music outside of this new game?
So no, I'm not working on any new solo music, purely because I think that this game essentially is that. Okay. So even if I was to write new solo music, it would probably just sound like exactly the music that's going into this game. So definitely urge people to check out this music once it's available, and when the demo version and videos for this game, the promotional videos come out, you'll be able to hear some of that music on there, which I'm really happy with. In regards to playing live, I play bass in a punk band, which is also nice. Very like James Calvin Wilsey used to.
You've come full circle.
Yeah, I know, right? I play bass in a punk band purely because I think I mentioned earlier that I think it's really important to keep performing, to stay out there and kind of just keep living the dream, as it could be said. It's really important for your soul, I think, as a musician to. And so for me, I play in this punk band because it's not stressful. It's like there's no improvisation. I play the songs. I play the parts that I've written, and I play them, and I rock out while I'm playing them, and I have a good time. And the only improvisation comes in trying to figure out the best way to get a sound out of the amplifier, trying to figure out how much bass and treble and gain I need. That's the only improvisation for the whole show. The actual performance is just, it's rehearsed start to finish. But it's just soul food. It's good for my soul. I enjoy it. And like you said, I come full circle. I still love punk music so much. And the other thing that I would say as well is that the one thing that I've really learned is through this whole career, and I hope it's going to go on longer, but is that the most important thing, I think, I could be wrong, but I think I've come to this conclusion, the most important thing is to enjoy every journey, like enjoy everything you do. And sometimes that can be really hard, especially when it's something that's stressful or something that takes time. But at the end of the day, like, they all come to an end, right? And you eventually what you're doing will end, and all you will have of it is the memories of, and how much you enjoyed it. And it's very easy to work on something and think, this is so stressful, I just want it to be over. But it will be over. And if that's all you have, well, then was it really worth doing it,
You did make a really good point. That's absolutely correct.
And so with this punk band, man, that's my thing there. It's like, I don't overthink it. I go to rehearsal, I rock out playing the songs, I turn up with my bass, and I play and I enjoy it. And I try and enjoy the sound check. I try and enjoy the carrying my stuff up the stairs to the to the stage. I try and just enjoy all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, one last question before we wrap things up. You mentioned that you do independent work for video games. Outside of this new game you're working on, do you have a favorite game that you've contributed to?
The company that I work for was a company called Ubisoft. It's a French company, and they kind of like, their majority of their games, I would say, are kind of like quite real, like realistic kind of games where you've got like real people in reasonably like realistic situations. And yeah, so it's a lot of like realism, basically. And that was like really lucky for me, because my music, like I said, it came from punk and then hard rock and metal music, and then got into jazz, and then after the jazz stuff it was like the Japanese music, and then it went back to the British music. And I feel like a lot of that music is the metal stuff can get a little bit fantasy and a little bit kind of unreal, but a lot of the like punk music, I mean, that's really real music, honest music, I think, warts and all. Yeah. The British music as well, things like The Cure, David Bowie, Joy Division, those bands, that was also pretty honest music, And so I was lucky to get in that, to be working in that company purely because my music is that kind of thing as well. I'm always going for a sense of like realism, as opposed to like, let's say, music for like some of the more childish games. And we have a lot of them over here in Japan, like music that they might not necessarily be kids games, but they're more childish, and they lend themselves more to kind of childish sounds. So like, fun sounds, blips and major scales, Right. I haven't written a song using the major scale I don't think in my entire career, man. I'm 100% minor scale, And if I use the major scale, then I have to use a tone that's like something dark and scary and haunting, I struggle with major music. So I wouldn't say that like there's a specific game that I like enjoyed working on more than any of the others. But the one thing that I can say that definitely was how I contributed to that whole music team was that I was very much trying to keep everything human and down to earth And another example of that is, the technology is getting so good now that it's sometimes hard to be able to hear the difference between something that isn't a human played instrument and something that was programmed on a synthesizer.
Yeah.
And something that shocked me when I first recorded in a video game context was that they had a program on my guitar called Melodyne. Melodyne is a program which tunes vocals. You use it to basically, you record vocals with it, and you can go in and you can basically move the vocal. You can take this word and that's a bit flat, so let's just sharpen that up a bit,
Okay.
And the technology has got so good now that you can do auto-tune, polyphonic auto-tune. So you could have an instrument that's playing more than, this isn't even new, this is quite old actually. You could have an instrument that's playing more than one note, and you can run this software and go in there and literally take one note and move that one note. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And they were using this on my guitar, and I was kind of offended. Like I was kind of like, they were like, "Oh, we'll just tune your guitar," and I'm like, "Oh, it's okay. I already tuned my guitar. I tune it all the time. I'm a recording dude, so I'm used to tuning my guitar."
Pro.
Yeah. And they were like, "Yeah, but it's not perfect." And I was like, I get what they meant, because guitars are wood and metal, so they're not perfect. They're never going to be perfectly in tune. And I got what they meant by perfect. By perfect, they meant mathematically perfect. And so
snap to a grid.
Yeah, exactly, to a grid, exactly. And originally that was really tough for me. That was really hard, like to allow them to take my guitar, which in my opinion has a lot of feeling and personality in it, and then they auto-tune it to the point where I listen to the programmed version and I'm almost like, why don't you just use the programmed version? Because they're so close, like. But that's the world we live in, it's right now it's perfection.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw a video, this was probably a couple of years ago now, where they took Steve Perry's vocals on some Journey song. I don't remember. I think it was Separate Ways, and auto-tuned it so that it was mathematically perfect. And it sounded terrible. It was like, that doesn't sound like Steve Perry at all.
No. You see, that's how I feel. And so, like, another thing that they would do as well is it would be like, okay, you play a part, and then that part's going to come back later on in the song, but we've already got it, so you don't need to do it again. We'll just copy paste. That also was something that was kind of like, okay, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like, obviously, I get it, and if that's what the sound you're going for, then perfect. That's what we want, and I'm happy to be part of the team to achieve that kind of thing. But there was this little thing in me that's kind of like, you know what I mean? I take a lot of pride in the fact that, like, no, maybe it is slightly different the second time, but that's human. That's what real music sounds like. And so my thing in that sound team, in that music team, for all the games that we worked on, was essentially pushing the idea of, let's keep it as human as we can, and let's push back against the idea of having everything super perfect, because at the end of the day, if you could be completely unmusical, but if you know all the little tricks and techniques to get something to sound good, you could put in 100 hours and end up being like Michael Bolton. You know what I mean? I'm a huge Michael Bolton fan. Even though you can't sing a word, you end up with this amazing vocal take, and which is fine. But there are people out there who are genuinely, that sound just comes out of them. Like Alan Holdsworth, you could hear him play on a guitar without an amplifier. It was him. That sound was him. James Calvin Wilsey, that sound, it's like, if he came and played a session for me, I don't care what he plays. What he played. It's like, no. All his pain and all his experience and all his, is all in there. And like, you don't even have to be able to hear it straight away. It's like, listen to it. And then listen to it again, and then listen to something else he did, and then hear some story about him, and then all of a sudden, I get it.
Yep.
I get it. And all those things that you originally thought, oh, it's out of tune, doesn't matter anymore. No, it doesn't matter. You know,
Exactly.
And so it's kind of a roundabout answer to your question, but basically, yeah, like my thing for all the games I worked on was trying to keep that human element in there as much as possible, you know, because in all industries there is an industry standard, and that standard is constantly being pushed up by the technology that's, you know, changing and getting better. But at the same time, you know, there's a real beauty in not only like mistakes, because I don't want to say mistakes, but in things that are considered possibly as mistakes or you know, imperfections, exactly. There's a perfection in imperfection, and I think it's really important that we hold on to that and keep hold of that, and I'm going to continue to have that as probably the core element in all of my video games going forward, just as it has been in my video games and my solo albums, my instrumental albums of the past as well.
Oh, I love it. Well, I think that is a perfect place to wrap this up. Where can people find you online? I know you've got music available. Where can people follow you to keep up with what you're up to?
Sure. So you can find me on my website, which is Timothy Reid. That's Reid is REID, timothyreid.com. I'm trying to get better at updating that website. And I'm also on TuneCore, which is TUNECORE, which is a Japanese music distribution site. They have a lot of my stuff. But, you know, YouTube, Spotify has a lot of my stuff. My problem is that because my heroes are Alan Holdsworth, Charlie Parker, Jaco Pastorius, James Calvin Wilsey, all these people who were notoriously bad at kind of playing the game, you know, the whole music business, marketing, notoriously bad at doing that, and would like disappear for years and not do anything, and, you know, and pull albums because they didn't want people to hear. Yep, exactly, you know. They're my heroes. And so I'm pretty, unfortunately, all my heroes are the guys who, they didn't have a great marketing promotion thing. And so I fall into that category. So I'm trying to get better at promoting myself, and I need to update my website more. So I'm going to try and get back on the ball and update my website more. But people can follow me on Instagram. I think it's Timothy Reid Official on Instagram. And like I said, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Spotify, and you can search my name. But yeah, some of it probably isn't me who uploaded it. It's probably someone else has uploaded my music. But to be honest with you, I don't care, because they're doing me a favor, because I would just forget to pay the money to, you know, extend it. So I'm happy for those people who've re-uploaded my music to YouTube and stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it is. It's all up there. I went through and I was listening to it, going back, because I was having an issue with Apple Music this week. I don't know what the hell is going on. So I gave up, and I'm like, I'm going to go check YouTube. So it was up there. So I appreciate those people doing that too. So thank you so much for spending, you know, part of a good chunk of your morning with me, and just kind of just talking through your music and your unique career path. It's really unlike anybody else that I've ever had on the show. So thank you so much.